Shannon Bryant, Virtual and Blended Learning Coordinator here, and this video is about remediation and accommodations in Nearpod. Planning for what you're going to do when kids in your class get it wrong. Now, the great thing about remediation and Nearpod is, remember, you can see all their boards in real time, so you can catch those mistakes as they're happening. But are you prepared for what to do when they happen? I like to look at my plan in Nearpod, and I personally create in Nearpod using Google Slides. So down at the bottom in my notes for my slides, I try to look for a misconception on each slide. Then I can just add in the notes a question I'm going to ask a kid, maybe to get them over the hump of that thing that's got them stuck. Or maybe it's a hint, or an example of an easier problem, or even a resource that they can check out. So I'm not saying that on every slide I add all four of those things, but I am saying that I look for the misconception on each slide, and then I document in that slide how I'm going to help a kid overcome that. In an earlier video, I talked about a lesson structure that's very discovery-based, starting with how you're going to get their attention, and then how are you going to get them to discover, and how are you going to know that they got what they should have gotten from the discovery. And then when you get to that point where students are applying that new information, you're about to let them go to do independent practice, because they should be ready for it at that point. But somewhere in there, you also need to be making plans for what you're going to do for those kids that they're not ready to go and work independently. And being able to look for that moment and know which kids need what by the time you get there is really important. I like to take some notes while I'm doing the Nearpod with my kids remotely, so I kind of know what kid needs to be where for a small group lesson. You can do that just by printing your roster or downloading it to Google Sheet and using a separate device, whatever you like. So small groups. First of all, yes, you can do them remotely. You can use breakout rooms, but my favorite way is to just schedule them. So for example, I teach high school math classes. I have two of them. One of my classes meets every single day. So I'm telling kids to come to a live Zoom session on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. Then I schedule my small groups on Tuesdays and Thursdays, where I give kids independent practice that they can work on. Any kid can come to those small groups if they're struggling with something and they want to join. But the kids that I have noticed on the other days when I was teaching in that Nearpod that I tell have to come. It's almost like a built-in tutorial time, because I know that coming to tutorials before and after school is just really difficult for some kids. The other thing you need to know about small groups, it doesn't have to be an entirely separate lesson. Remember this? You had some things up there that they were doing by the time they got to that point where they were stuck. So you can go back to the Nearpod that you used for them to discover and to check their understanding, and use that again with this group of kiddos. You can also help them or question them through the independent practice. The most important thing is not to feel like you have to have a whole separate mini lesson. It's really just questioning a kid and asking them some key questions that might help them become independent and not need your help in the future. Questions like, what did your notes say about that? How could you use that example from your notes? Well, what did you put down in your notes? What could we add to those notes? How can you use your online textbook or other resource that you've given them in class? Getting a kid to think about how they can use the tools that you have been and will continue to equip them with is a great place to start. That way, when a kid leaves your small group, it's not that they came in to get answers, but they learned how to question themselves to come up with their own answers. I talked to you about pulling small groups for remediation, but I know there are other accommodations and ways that you need to be able to give help to your students. And when you're teaching remotely, you're not right next to them to give them those nudges and helps. Remember that Nearpod comes with the Immersive Reader tool. Now, to activate this tool, you will have to go into your own Nearpod account and click Settings, and then the very first option will be to enable Immersive Reader. It will remain an option for your students until you go back into Settings and turn it back off. But in this tool, not only can students have their reading read to them, and it's any typing that has been done in that Nearpod, it won't be able to read images. They can also color code if they struggle with dyslexia or dysgraphia. The color coding can really help them. They can change the way the font is as well. They can also select from a whole bunch of different languages and have it read in their language if English isn't their preferred language. I hope you found something useful in this video, and if you did, like it. And why not subscribe?